Well, this weekend marks Rosh Hashanah, the start of the Jewish New Year. So if you and your family are celebrating, Happy New Year to you. Does it mark a new year for a new outlook in the Mideast? Joining me to talk about that are Dr. Yael Aronoff, Associate Professor of International Relations at the James Madison College at Michigan State, and Saeed Khan, Senior Lecturer of Near East and Asian Studies and the Director of Global Studies at Wayne State University. Thank you both so much for being here. I'm really curious about both of your takes on whether or not, because it very much right now depends on which funnel you live in on social media, as to just how massive or underwhelming these developments are, that Israel is now being recognized with diplomatic relations with both Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates. Yael, let me start with you. What are your thoughts on what's happened?
I would say it's neither underwhelming nor monumental, but a really good positive step that really needs to be built on. So I think it's good news for two primary reasons. One is that, of course, Israel wants normalization with all countries around the world, and has had, its peace treaties with Jordan and Egypt for many years, but has really yearned for normalized relations with other countries. I think it deserves such normal relations because, other countries in the region and the world, people recognize them, and other states have normal relations with them, even though they may have disputed or occupied territories. And many countries in the region in the Middle East are in that situation as well. Secondly, I think it's a relief in that it also delayed, if not stopped, possibly for at least 4 years, any unilateral annexation on the part of Israel in the West Bank that was kind of seriously talked about and was impending. And I think that would have really been detrimental to continuing to try to have progress on the Israeli-Palestinian peace front. So in that sense, I think it's a positive step. However, in an article I recently wrote for the Detroit Jewish News, I said also curb your enthusiasm.
I saw that, yes.
Because it's not as if this is necessarily all countries in the region are going to follow in the footsteps of UAE and Bahrain. And I think that further acceptance in the region will still be contingent on Israel and the Palestinian Authority reaching a peace agreement.
Let me move to Saeed, because yes, in fact, it's not like over the years we've heard of a lot of tension between Bahrain and Israel or the UAE and Israel. So big deal or not to you, Saeed?
Well, I think anything that happens in the Middle East can be seen as a big deal if it moves from the status quo. But many things in the Persian Gulf have to be gauged from what is above the waterline and what is below the waterline. And so what we have here is something which is now visible above the waterline, and that is relationships that actually has been not only ongoing for a significant period of time, but also quite close when it comes to the kind of interaction and the connections. The UAE, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and even Qatar have had relations officially with the state of Israel, except that, of course, they have been more subtle and they've been more discreet, shall we say, and not in the public view. And part of that is it's important to understand the role of optics in the Middle East. Sometimes things that are done on a bridge aren't as appealing as things that are done in a tunnel. And we have then these relationships that have been going on for quite a while. But now I think we find that with things out in the open, it's going to proceed to show what the real relationship between these various countries is. As you said rightly, it really cannot be called a peace deal, because that would suggest that these countries have been in a state of war, which isn't the case. But business deals, strategic deals, and perhaps most importantly with the Persian Gulf, trying to then demonstrate what in this proxy war, if you will, between the Arab states and Iran, now we find Israel having a more explicit role in taking a side.
Yael, and I'm already starting to run out of time here, where does this leave the Palestinian people?
I think that it was telling that the Arab League did not kind of reject these agreements as the Palestinians had hoped. And so it's a real sign that they have to possibly shift their strategy and really maybe come back to the negotiating table when it's possible. I think they have primarily stepped away from the negotiating table. They've talked about settlements, but I think the main reason is that Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert gave a very serious peace offer in 2008. They possibly, didn't follow up with that, hoping that President Obama might exert more pressure on Israel and that they might get a little better deal. It was a bad gamble because Netanyahu was elected, who was willing to concede less, accommodate less, compromise less in such a peace deal. So there, in a sense, was little incentive for them to negotiate for a worse deal than they would have received in 2008. Yeah. I think with the new government in Israel and the possible rotation that Prime Minister Gantz, if that is implemented, becomes a prime minister, there'll be a greater opening. Perhaps also if Biden is elected in the United States, there'll be more of an opening to really restart those peace negotiations with continued constructive support of these Arab countries, including the UAE and Bahrain and Egypt.
Saeed, I've only got about 30 seconds left, but to that point, is there any way to characterize this other than a win for the Trump administration? I mean, he's been roundly criticized for international policy decisions, but doesn't this have to be a win for the president?
Well, it remains to be seen. If the president is looking at this through the optics of the deal, then perhaps it is. But we also have to take a look at what are some of the broader strategic interests. China is going to be a major presence moving forward in the Gulf with this relationship with Iran. Turkey has to be examined as well. And I'm not sure how much of this has really been thought out to go ahead and address those issues that are going to come up in the very near future.
I thank you both so much. I wish we had I could talk to you about this for about 2 or 3 hours, but we don't have that kind of time because Meet the Press is coming up whether I'm done or not. Thank you both so much. Hope you have a great day and stay safe.
Thank you.
We come back, we'll talk about casting your vote, which you can actually start doing later this week. This is Flashpoint on Local 4.